Hello everyone, Missy here today, and we will be doing volume. So on our agenda today, of course, we have materials, objectives, and joke of the day. So I'll start with objectives. You'll see in the bottom corner, I had to move things around a little bit, but our objective for today is I can identify and solve problems involving volume. So by the end of the lesson today, we'll be able to identify and solve volume problems. And then for our materials, we have paper and pencil. So again, if you don't have a paper and pencil, you have anything to write with and write on, that works just fine. And if not, following along on an electronic device works as well. And I will give you some time to get those, but while you are doing that, I will tell you the joke of the day. So today's joke is a little bit different. If you guys could look at the screen, I have an image posted, and then if you could multiply all those numbers together and tell me what you get. So I'll give you 2 minutes to get those materials, and if you already have them, just think about that joke. You can use a calculator if you like, but if you can just stop here for about 2 minutes. All right, so for the joke of the day today, you actually didn't need a calculator at all, because if you multiplied all those numbers together, I hope you didn't forget 0, because anything multiplied by 0 will always be 0. So that one was a little bit tricky. That one got me too, but it is a little bit fun. Something I didn't think about at the beginning, but again, anything multiplied by 0 will always be 0. So technically you didn't need that calculator. Moving forward, we have vocabulary. So I want to just talk about a few vocabulary words that you'll be hearing me say, obviously, in this lesson. So volume. So volume is the amount of space an object occupies. So inside the cube, how much space there is. Inside the rectangular prism, how much space there is. So for volume for cubes and rectangular prism, the formula will be volume equals length times width times height. So on the bottom, I do have a few images for you here. I will explain which one's which. So the length in the first image that has 10 inches, 4 inches, and 6 inches, the length of that is going to be 10 inches. And then the width you'll see is the 4. So that's going to be that little line on the bottom. And then the height is going to be our 6 inches. So that's how tall our object is. And then on our other image, our length for that is going to be 8. And then the side you see for the width is going to be 5 inches. And then the height is going to be 12 inches. So knowing which one is which will help. But again, you know, they're all being multiplied together. So if you do happen to switch one around for these specific problems, that'll be okay. But moving forward, you might have to definitely know which is which. So let's start thinking. So if you multiply length times width times height, what would the units be? So in the end, like when you do, if you have to do a word problem, you usually write like, oh, John drove 10 miles. And then usually you can do like squared, cubed, everything else too. So if you multiply those 3 sides and like the side length, the width, and the height, what would the units be in your answer? And then if a cube has 3 units, if a cube has units up, if a cube had units of 3 inches on all sides, what would its volume be? So I will go back to the volume formula if you guys didn't remember right after this, and then if you guys could just maybe jot that down, you'll be using that the entire lesson. And then if you were given units of 3 inches for the length, 1 inch for the width, and 2 inches for the height, what would the shape of this be? So I'll go back to this vocabulary slide for a sec and then have you guys write down this formula. The volume equals length times width times height, so that you guys remember, and we will be using that throughout the whole lesson. All right, so going back to the start thinking slide, I'll have you guys stop here for about 5 minutes to think about that, write those answers down, and then I'll come back and review that with you. All right, so I hope that was enough time for you guys, but moving on to our answers. So if you multiply length, width, and height, what would the units be? And the units would be in cubed. So your answer is going to be to the cubed, so it'll be 3 on the top. So I'll go more in depth in that on the next question. So the next one was if the cube had the units of 3 inches on all sides, what would its volume be? So we know volume is length times width times height, and a cube is going to be 3 units the entire way around. So we have our length being 3 inches times 3 inches, which is our width, times 3 inches, which is our height. So when we multiply all those together, our volume equals 27 inches cubed. So you see indicated on my answer there, I have the cubed a little bit raised because we know our units are going to be in cubed. And then for our last one, we have if you were given the units of 3 inches for length, 1 inch for width, and 2 inch for height, what would the shape be? And the shape would be a rectangular prism. So a cube is going to be a square where all of its side lengths are going to be the same. A rectangular prism is going to be a little bit like what I showed you in the vocabulary section where the sides were all different. So moving forward, let's do some example of cubes. So you see here, I have the cube and I have 5 centimeters, 5 centimeters, 5 centimeters. So I did find one that had the single units in between each one for you guys to see. So it'd be super difficult for us to count all of those, but if we use the volume formula, we will be able to do that. So the formula used, I want you guys to find that. And then if each unit was worth 1 centimeter, what would the answer be? And what would your units be in? So I'll give you guys about 3 minutes to go over that. And if you can't figure that one out completely, that's okay. I'll review it with you and then we will continue on. All right, so the formula that we use for this is going to be volume equals length times width times height. And then if each unit was worth 1 centimeter, what would the answer be? So I have volume equals 5 centimeters times 5 centimeters times 5 centimeters, representing our length, our width, and our height. So when I multiply all those together, I did get 125 centimeters, but on the last question, it asked what my units would be in, and it would be in cubes. So volume equals 125 centimeters cubed. So make sure for volume, you guys, it's super, super important that you do enter your units because sometimes people may think that volume is squared, but it's not. Your answer is going to be in cubed because you're multiplying 3 different units together. So moving forward, now we have something similar. So we have examples of a rectangular prism. So this one is going to be like the one I told you about where all the sides are going to be different. So you know a rectangle is quite different from a square. So square has all the same units around all the sides. A rectangle is going to be a little bit different. So this is our rectangular prism. Again, I did find an image that had the single units. So if you really wanted to count it all, you could. But again, our volume formula is going to be actually best for this. So the formula that we use is what I'm looking for. And then I want you guys to identify which one's the length, which one's the width, and which one's the height. So you're going to write like length equals 6 centimeters, height equals blah, blah, blah. So you guys understand what I want for that. And then again, if each unit is worth 1 centimeter, what would the answer be? And then what would your units be in? So again, I'll have you guys pause here for about 3 minutes to do that. If you can't complete it fully, that's okay. I will go over the answer with you, and then there will be an opportunity for you later to do those on your own. All right, so the formula that we use for this is, again, volume equals length times width times height. That's going to be our standard volume formula. So if you know that one, you should be able to move forward in math. And then again, I wanted to identify the length, the width, and the height. So I have my length identified as 4 centimeters, representing the bottom. And then on the side, we see our width here. I have that identified as 3 centimeters, and then our height is going to be represented as our 5 centimeters. So once I identify them, it's perfect for me because then I can plug it into the formula. So I know the formula is length times width times height. So when I plug in length in my volume formula to find the answer, I get 4 centimeters, and then my width, when I plug that in, that gives me 3 centimeters, and then my height gives me 5 centimeters. So when I multiply those all together, that gives me the answer of 60 centimeters. And then it says, what would your units be in? So our units would be in cubed for volume. So volume equals 60 centimeters cubed. So again, that's super important for us to remember and write down because that is the units for volume. All right, so now I'm gonna have you guys try it on your own. So I have a rectangular prism shown, and I do have a cube shown. They both have the individual units in them. So again, if you want to count to double check, or if you wanted to count to figure it out, you could. Again, I would say volume formula is always going to be the easiest. So for both of these, you guys can do it separately. You can do it on the same one. I'm going to show you the answers separately though. So first, I want you guys to find the formula that's going to be used. And then I want you to identify the length, the width, and the height. So just like we did in the last one, identify which centimeters are going to be the length, the width, and the height. And then if each unit was worth 1 centimeter, what would the answer be? And then the last question was, what would your units be in? So if you guys could pause here for about 10 minutes to do both of those. I want you guys to try your hardest to be able to complete that fully. The questions were the same as the last two that we did together on the example, but again, if you guys could just try your best to figure those out on your own, and then I'll come back showing you the answer. Hopefully, instead of me telling you what the answer is, this time we're just comparing that ours are the same. So if you guys stop for about 10 minutes to do both of those, that would be great. All right, so for the first image, I have the rectangular prism shown, and then I'm going to go over the formula. So the formula that we used was length times width times height for volume. Again, try not to get confused with it being LX, WX, H. In this instance, we're using the X's as our times symbols. So that's the formula we'll use. And then when we identify the length, the width, and the height, I have my length identified as the 5 centimeters shown at the bottom of the rectangular prism. And then my width as 2 centimeters shown on the side. On the right side of the rectangular prism, we can see that it is 2 units. And then our height shown as 2 centimeters because we also have 2 units for our height. And then if each unit was worth 1 centimeter, what would the answer be? So I have 5 centimeters because I'm plugging in the length. And then when I plug in the width, I have 2 centimeters. And then when I plug in the height, I also have 2 centimeters. So then when I multiply the 5 times 2 together, that gives me the volume of 20 centimeters. But again, we are not completely finished yet. So our answer would be in cubed, so volume equals 20 centimeters, and then you see my cubed. It's a little bit far over. Sorry about that. It's a little bit difficult to insert those in, but our answer was in cubed, so 20 centimeters cubed for this rectangular prism. Moving on, now we have the cube shown here. So the same formula we're going to use is going to be length times width times height. If you don't like to use the x's, you can also use the dots to show that's going to be length times width times height. I think we did talk about that in a previous video talking about multiplication. And then our length, width, and height that we are identifying, since it is a cube, our length is 2 centimeters. It's going to be a little bit different. This one is shown on the top, or you can basically use any of them because they're all going to be the same. And then our width is going to be shown as 2. You can use the side ones. And then our height is also 2 centimeters. So then if we plug all those in, since the units are all worth 1 centimeter, if we plug all of those in our length, width, and height, my length is going to be 2 centimeters times my width of 2 centimeters times my height of 2 centimeters, which gives me a total of 8 centimeters. But again, we aren't done because our answer would be in cubed. So the volume equals 8 centimeters cubed with 3 raised over there. So I hope you guys were able to just compare answers with me and you were able to try that on your own. This is volume, so again, the volume of a cube will be just a tad bit easier since all the side lengths are going to be the same. The volume of a rectangular prism may be a little bit different. I always love to identify my length, width, and height first before I even start plugging anything in for my volume, because I find it easier when I write things out first. If it's like a word problem or just a volume problem, any kind of problem, I like to write out what I've been given first and then plug everything after. And I think that's going to be a great method for you guys to use as well, just so that you don't make any mistakes along the way and then have to go all the way back to the beginning and try all over again. So I found this great extra practice game for you guys here. Once it loads, so it is going to ask you for the volume. So we know this one is going to be rectangular prism. So our length for this is going to be 2 centimeters shown on the bottom. Our width is going to be 1 centimeter shown on the side, and our height is going to be 4 centimeters. So when I plug all those numbers in, my length being 2, my width being 1, and my height being 4, when I multiply all those together, I'm going to get the answer of 8. So I'm going to type in 8 here and then check my answer. Great job. So these ones are just a little bit different than the pictures I had shown you. I had shown you the ones that had each individual unit in it. A lot of the time you aren't going to get each individual unit just because that's not exactly what they always do. But these are exactly the same. If you just know the length, the width, and the height, you can just plug in those answers. So I'm going to do this one for you. So when I plug in my length, my width, and my height for volume, I'm going to get the answer of 20. I want to continue. Okay, this one. So this one, it's the same thing. You're still finding volume. So we're going to do the same formula. Volume equals length times width times height. But instead of typing in the number like the last time, you are going to click the correct answer on here. So when I plug in my length, my width, and my height, and multiply those all together, I'm going to get the answer of 40, and then I'm going to get cubic feet. So you know how I did mine to the answer of cubed at the end, cubic feet is the same thing. So let's go back here. So your answer can be like mine, how I showed in cubed, or you can write cubic centimeters, cubic feet, cubic, whatever the unit is going to be. You can write that as well. And then on to our last thing for today. Our objective, again, was I can identify and solve problems involving volume. So we identified the problems by indicating if it was a cube or a rectangular prism. And then when we indicated which one it was, we found the length times width times height. We knew the formula was volume equals length times width times height, and then we solved those problems and then got our answer, and we also indicated our units as well. So we did all that today, and you guys did great. So thank you so much for participating.